You're listening to a Count Out Podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Ballot, the place where the conversation begins. I'm your host, Ryan Knightsey, and for today's episode, this is going to be the place where the conversation ends. Not the podcast. No, don't worry. Put your thumbs away from the desubscribe button on Apple Podcasts. No, in fact, hit that button. Subscribe. Actually, subscribe 5 times. Leave 5 reviews. 5 reviews. No, in fact, this is the beginning of this season of The Ballot. The Ballot is officially out. Obviously, we have gone through all except for one. Sadly, if you're hearing this week or whatever, or you're hearing this at this point in time, because we got through everyone except for one, except for old Bill Mercer. And I'll talk about that, I guess, at some point in these 1 or 2 episodes, however many I'm going to do. But the season's coming to an end for this season, the 2025 season of The Ballot. I'm very happy with the output of this podcast this year. A lot of great guests, a lot of great conversations. And yeah, I'm very excited. And it ends with, me emailing old Dave and now becoming a first-time voter for the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame. So I'm very excited about that. Obviously, we already kind of kicked off this closing stretch here talking about the entire ballot in terms of who's on it, who has certainly popped back onto it, and sort of the stats and breakdowns from last year and how I feel like some things stat-wise can turn into this Hall of Fame season. But what I'm going to do now, and hopefully with less of a manic energy as that last episode was, not the Mochizuki one, but the analysis one. Excuse me. Oh God, burping already 2 minutes in. Oh my God, I just ate dinner. Boy howdy, my wife makes a mean HelloFresh meal. So what I want to do here, obviously, is go through and put together my ballot. I think this episodes, because I think this is going to be probably a 2-parter. I did something like this last season and it ended up being a 2-parter, just because there's so much to talk about. What I want to go through is talk about and sort of put together who I think my ballot is going to consist of, what regions I'm voting in, because I'm not going to vote in every single region, just because of lack of knowledge and research. I spent a year doing all this research on all these new people, but still so many people on this ballot to do the research of. And as a first-time voter, I don't want to sort of skew things. How I'm viewing the ballot in certain aspects, and sort of the long-standing conversations we've had all year about this ballot, about the various regions and whatnot. So I'm going to go through. There probably won't be a full ballot by the end of this episode, but there'll certainly be some regions, a partial ballot put together by me of what I'm going to do. I'm going to say that it would probably be, the result will probably be a 99%. This is what I'm voting on by whenever I finish a region and move on to the next thing. I don't think I'll submit it right away. There's still like a lot of podcast episodes of various podcasters and wrestling personalities that I want to listen to. I don't necessarily know if they will sway any decision for me. I'll point it out that there's already one podcast that has significantly swayed my modern U.S. and Canada very, very significantly. A very ironic one as well. But I sort of want to see what other people are talking about, what the other people are thinking, mainly because, there's, I think part of the conversation, what I like about the Hall of Fame season is just like all of not only the research that gets done, but the conversation about everyone and all the different aspects. And like I said, I don't necessarily feel like they're going to greatly sway me one way or the other. If anything, it might be like those on the line coin flip picks that I may or may not have. But I still want to listen to a couple, like I said. So I think like what I'm going to put together and present here across this episode, 2 episodes, is going to be that sort of 99%, this is what it is. And I will, I think I probably post on social media or whatever, what my full ballot was going to be when I submit it to Dave. So like I said, I think this is pretty much going to be what it is. I'm talking through it, what I think about it, and who I'm pretty much locking in as of this moment. and probably will be voting for the 2025 Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame season. So before I do any of that, I want to talk a little bit about sort of the broad strokes about the ballot that's sort of been popping up throughout this year. Things that I've been interested in, things what the guests have been interested in talking about. And there's been a lot of different things. I think the very obvious one that I'm sort of starting off with is this sort of, not necessarily dilemma per se, but there is this conversation regarding the Wrestling Observer Newsletter and how, pretty much all the draws are in, right? And that the slam dunks are pretty much all in at this point. There are obviously some other, like I said, I think there's other slam dunks that are probably still on this ballot. I think Rest of the World has a couple, I want to say like 2 or 3, maybe just 2 off the top of my head. I want to say that there's certainly a couple in other regions. I think like there's like people that do really well, but then, contextually it's like, how are they? I think like Modern USA, Canada has a little slam dunkage right there. If not a slam dunk, then a 1-2 alley-oop, whatever, 1-2 alley-oop. I think that historical probably, I think at least has one that I can know off the top of my head. So I think there's like still some there, but a large part, this change has happened where all of the massive draws are into the Observer Hall of Fame. And I do think that we'll probably clean up the rest of them within the next couple years. So then it's just sort of a question of like, what now? And obviously with the state of professional wrestling in 2025, what is a massive draw, right? I mean, it took Roman, I'm not a Roman defender, settle down, put the pitchforks down. It took Roman several years to get there, and he was the biggest star of the biggest company. And many of the detractors, including myself, would say that like, he also wasn't necessarily a big draw. Yes, she's the biggest draw and the biggest name and the biggest star in the biggest company, so that would denote a big draw. But like, what does it mean when the company's failing or when the company doesn't work? And you got to bring in John Cena to pop houses because Roman can't do it anymore, and Roman couldn't really do it, and it took so much to get him to finally get to that point of being an actual tangible draw in terms of popping houses. That is like sort of that question. It's like what are these draws going to be as the business, as not just like the wrestling business, but like culture in general, this sort of like fight between attention and everything getting diversified and split across all of these different platforms. And now I'm recording this the day that, Warner Brothers Discovery is going to put up itself up for sale. So then you have like all things coming back together, and how are all these things going to shake out, right? And it's just sort of the question of like, will we ever get back to those old territory days, the 70s, 60s, all those early territory days, or we even get to the Hogan era where like you're popping Gates numbers left, right, and center, right? Attitude era where they like TV attendance is through the roof. That I highly doubt we'll ever get to attendance where like 6 million people are watching it at one time. But it's just like this thing of like, and that's also like part of like why I like doing the Dragon Gate attendance data stuff that I put together and Stardom stuff, is that I think it's important to note like what it is contextually within the promotion and with the country and all, and with a time period especially, because when you're looking at like a modern US and Canada drawing record, right? You can't compare it obviously to historical. It's impossible. Comparing modern US wrestling drawing standards to historical data is apples and oranges practically. It's impossible. And I do feel like the wrestling industry, I don't know, I don't necessarily feel like it's moving towards like any sort of massive drawing state. Like I think we're in boom periods right now with WWE, and to a certain degree US and Canada. I mean, I guess TNA is going through a boom period. I don't think you can necessarily deny that. Having 8,000 at a Bound for Glory show is pretty significant. I feel like I'm such like a person I don't want to be defending, but I said that Roman and TNA, everyone put your pitchforks down. But it's like It is the best numbers. They like the best probably attendance year that they've ever done. Granted, how much are those attendance real? But you can say anyways. You say that about everyone in wrestling. Japan. Pre Bushiroad era Japan. All these sort of different things. But alas, I digress. So my point of all of this is that like I don't necessarily feel like we're going to get to any sort of day soon that we will have, I did another burp. We will have, I apologize, slam dunk drawers really anytime soon. I feel like we might get one or two, but realistically, it's like once Cody goes in terms, let's just say modern US and Canada, for example, because that's the easiest example, historical, like someone like Bob Ellis, he's so low that like it's going to take a little bit of time, and it's also historical. It's not really going to change or add anytime soon for anyone else's cases per se. Rest of the world, an amalgamation of who the hell knows. Japan, I don't know. Japan, well, we're past the Bushiroad boom periods. I don't really know. It's gonna be older regions, I guess, in terms of more historical, I guess, kind of. But alas, I don't necessarily. Once Cody goes in modern, it's like who is like the next biggest American Canadian draw after that would be on the ballot. I don't know. It's probably then someone from AEW, right? I mean, I guess like someone like MJF. No, I wouldn't say he's a draw. He actively hurt the business, but he was in the main event of that one show, but I wouldn't give him that credit. Is it Moxley? There's things about it, yes. Things about it, no. Is it Hangman Adam Page? Yes and no. Probably have to really like dive in deep to figure that one out. But it's just this thing of like, even now that it's like these are all the number 2 promotion compared to WWE in terms of like attendance, right? And this is all happening with AEW, where WWE is also now going through a boom period. So like once Cody goes in, it's like, and he's gonna go in. He's probably gonna go in this year. So once he goes in, it is just sort of this thing of like, okay, I don't think there's going to be any slam dunkers anytime soon. So I have been sort of thinking about how I think, and the problem with all the slam dunkers going in is that I think when it comes to data, that's pretty objective. I can throw together a report on Dragon Gate attendance. I can throw together a report on Stardom attendance. You can have Ethan Tyler put together like, hey, here's all the European house dates for this person. You can have Phil put data for European data as well. You can have all this data collected, but that's all objective stuff. And I think we're sort of in a lot of ways getting to sort of the end of these like boom slam dunk draw. So I think it's like kind of the conversation who's left. And I do think that the tough part is that the transferring of slam dunkers has kind of shifted, in my opinion. And I've been thinking about this a lot, and I'm not necessarily 100% confident with it, but this is how I'm currently feeling with it. And I would love to hear the conversation, see the conversation about it. I sort of feel like we might be moving towards a period of slam dunk workers. Because when you think of slam dunk draws, there is a good chance that these draws are not necessarily great workers. Hulk Hogan being a prime example, right? Junkyard Dog is a great worker in Mid-South. I wouldn't necessarily say he's a great worker, obviously, in any sort of modern sense. Historical, maybe, but obviously, great many periods, his later years where he's not period. And so I kind of feel like, the period of wrestling has kind of transferred over to more of a focus on work rate and less of a focus on drawing. I think that's just kind of a macro industry issue, macro culture issue. But at the same time, I think that's just what it kind of has shifted towards. Wrestling has gotten the most athletic, presumably, in terms of flippy, high flying stuff or just pure athleticism, striking, power. I don't know, name something, technical ability, maybe not technical ability per se. That could always be sort of timeless, but it's sort of shifted athletically significantly, right? in terms of more an acrobatic style. And an acrobatic style to me feels, or at least comes across, more athletic than like a football player dunking a bunch of dudes, which both very athletic. I can't do any of that. Don't get me wrong here. So I was just sort of thinking about how, like, I feel like the Hall of Fame in itself has sort of been shifting to sort of slam dunk Hall of Fame workers. And the problem with that, obviously, is it's very subjective and you have to convince more people. But I've been sort of thinking about it in a way where I think we're shifting to that. And I feel like people obviously dunk on Ishii in his induction, but I think that was like maybe one of the first people you can point at that is sort of like a slam dunk Hall of Fame worker. I'll say this later, obviously, but I think like Masaki Mochizuki is a guy that is probably a slam dunk Hall of Fame worker, a guy who is been top of his form for practically 20 to 30 years. Pretty slam dunk to me. Io Shirai is a great worker for like a decade. I think like the best thing that Zack Sabre Jr. I'm just looking at Japan for right now. The best thing that like Zack Sabre Jr. has to offer is his like work. The best, in terms, at least in a modern sense, the best guy, the best British wrestler in modern history, not named Will Ospreay, and the best technical wrestler, not named Bryan Danielson. These are things that I would attribute to Zack Sabre Jr. In a modern sense, obviously, you have like you're going to have more of the proliferation of AEW wrestlers who that company is obviously more work rate focused. And not to say that they're not focused on drawing, obviously, but it's fair to. I think it's fair to say that. So I just feel like we're shifting to this other thing, and I think obviously the issue of that is more subjective, and it's hard to pull data, especially more older data or more specifically Japan data, just because of like early cage match and history and the rules of all that stuff of putting rating on that stuff. The sort of like Rotten Tomatoes effect on some ratings, like older ratings, is that like a lot of Rotten Tomatoes. You'll see a movie that came out in 1944. And it'll tell you that it has like a 90% on Rotten Tomatoes, but it's all from like modern ratings, right? And Rotten Tomatoes is working on like fixing that and adding more of the time, points, right? I said it before that like, when Big Lebowski came out, it was panned. Like they hated the Coen brothers for making the Big Lebowski after Fargo, because the Fargo was this like Oscar-winning child that was a beautiful, great movie by everyone that watched it, and they were like, oh, please make the next great cinema classic, and then they made the Big Lebowski, a stoner comedy, and everyone at the time said, what the fuck is this? And then 10, 20 years later, it's become like arguably one of their, sentiment, what's the word? One of those sentimental, I can't speak, favorites, right? It's like one of the things that like when people think of the Coens, they think of Big Lebowski in a positive sense. All I'm trying to say is that I feel like we're shifting in a Ballot sense to Hall of Fame workers. If wrestling is the best it's ever been, and you can say that to Dave, and Dave would agree with you based on his star ratings, wrestling is like the best athletically it's ever been, then that would tell me that then there should be a lot of Hall of Fame, slam dunk wrestlers that are either on the ballot or coming to the ballot at some point soon. And so I think it's just a matter of recognizing that. I think and like I say, it's a very subjective issue. A lot of people find it easier to look at the data points and undeniable objective data points of drawing and go to that first. And someone can be a slam dunk Hall of Fame draw level for like 10 years straight, and they're like, yeah, that's good, they're going in the Hall of Fame. But if they're a slam dunk Hall of Fame wrestler worker for 10 years, they're sort of like, I don't know. So yeah, I don't know exactly what it is. That's the sort of shift I'm feeling is happening. I feel like it makes sense that, look, if wrestling's the best it's ever been, we are shifting toward this thing. Drawing is going to be harder to argue, and you're going to be more scrapping data together as time goes on, I think. And then it's just going to be a matter of convincing people, hey, was this person like one of the best wrestlers in the world at the time? And granted, at the same time, it's like, look, the world, the the world will only have so many great wrestlers, and I think there's a good chance. Like, I mean, so many people plug any wrestler out of today and put them in the past, and they're gonna smoke them. I don't know. I'm kind of rambling at this point, but I can't finish my closing thought here, but because I can't finish necessarily the loop because I don't know what it is. I don't know what it means. I don't know where we're going towards this path. I'm rambling too much. I have other thoughts on the ballot as a whole, and I already spent 20 minutes. I think other vague things about the Hall of Fame. We have so many announcers and non-wrestlers. There was sort of a conversation on the Voice of Wrestling Discord about this a little bit. I've been sort of thinking quietly over the past year about like announcing tag teams, quote unquote. Looking at wrestler announcers and looking at the pairs of them, and seeing how they would do. Like for example, it's pulling one out of my butt. A team like Mike Tenay and Don West. And I'm like, yeah, they're a great team. They're a really great team. I think they're fun. I think it's the only way to get Don West into the Hall of Fame in any capacity, obviously, which is a shame because Don West is so much fun. But that also then removes, because with the classic tag team logic, it removes Mike Tenay's WCW run. It removes his AAA Worlds Collide stuff. But yeah, the funness of Don West and his shirts. And I was just sort of thinking about like that. And I'm trying to think of, there's so many other different people you can certainly pull from. But I just sort of feel like it's an interesting idea to have Hall of Fame tag teams. A lot of this is I think statements and I feel statements because this is just train of thought thinking right now. And look, it's my Hall of Fame audio, so I can feel and think however I feel, I think. So yeah, I think that like there's something there that's interesting. I think you might run into the same problems of, like the drawing stuff and historical, maybe less so historical significance, but that sort of thing of like, is the team of like Don West and Mike Tenay, is they going to be active draws to TNA when they were there? I don't know. That would argue they were probably one of the better parts of TNA, especially early on, but it's just, again, the usual suspects with those sort of tag team and issues. What other stuff have I been thinking about? Baby boo boo, looking around. There certainly has been other stuff. Certainly has been a lot of other stuff that's been happening. Women's wrestling and wrestling from people of color, I think, is very interesting. I think we're getting a lot of pushes and a lot of conversations about that with Mercedes Moné, Becky Lynch. I think like having them on two ends of the spectrum is very interesting. A Junkyard Dog and Sweet Daddy Siki is very interesting to me. I find that I had it. It was the sort of this idea that has sprung up that a little bit of the Les Kellett episode with Ethan Tyler and special guest Cole Cabana. That the sort of thing I've been thinking about as well is just like the Hall of Fame to me, the bigness, the smallness, the sleekness of a Hall of Fame. What is it to me? What is my viewpoint? And I'm still putting it together, I think, as a voter. But to me, like a Hall of Fame should obviously be the best of the best. And the question is how do you define the best of the best? Is it just the best of that year, best of those decades, that era or whatever? Or is it something like a little bit bigger, which is like the best of the promotion during that era, the best style during that era, right? And what I'm getting in here, obviously, is the sort of Les Kellett, Masquerita Sagrada thing of the best to ever do what they do. And that is Les Kellett, seemingly the best comedy wrestler, right? There's obviously a bunch of other wrestlers that have done comedy. Cole Cabana obviously is a modern person. R-Truth, Santino Marella, I guess. Toru Yano in Japan, Stalker Ichikawa. Others are available. Their names are available. DDT, a lot of DDT guys. But Les Kellett, at least in a historical sense, has probably done the best comedy ever. Masquerita Sagrada, undoubtedly the most famous mini of all time. And arguably the best to ever do it, right? Most recognizable, historically significant for sure. So it's just sort of like, does the Hall of Fame include the best of that? Does it include the best hardcore wrestlers, the best tag teams? When you look at it, wrestling has always been predominantly run by, white men. And so they're sort of like the main genre of wrestling. And there are a lot of subgenres, a lot of different classes. There's different weight classes from cruiserweights. There's different genres, I think, in tag team wrestling and women's wrestling. There is obviously, like I said, comedy wrestling, hardcore wrestling, mini wrestling. There's a lot of different ways, technical wrestling, like with Zack Sabre Jr., or high flying, like Io Sky. I'm still looking at the Japan category. Obviously regional, like Japan or Mexico or rest of the world, yada, yada, yada. So it's just sort of like, it is this thing of like, what is the best of the best? And should the best comedy wrestler of all time be on the Hall of Fame? Should the best mini of all time be in the Hall of Fame? And I don't know. I'm sort of rambling my train of thoughts here. I would love to know what people per se think. Because I don't know. I'm a baby. I'm a baby at this. I'm a first time voter. I've done my best to do a good amount of research on a lot of these candidates, as much as I can, as much as my time has given me. I didn't necessarily expect to receive a ballot this year, but now that I have, and now I'm like nervous about having one. You know what I mean? You work so hard to get this, and then you're like, oh boy, the pressure. I feel the pressure for some reason. I want my votes to matter, and I want to look at everything from a macro lens for the Hall of Fame, but obviously a micro lens. And what better way to start with Mexico? No, I'm kidding. What a transition that would have been. But yeah, that's my vague thoughts on the ballot. I feel like that I have right now. I feel like now, as good a time as any, would be to get into it. And so I'm going to start with modern, US and Canada. There's obviously I'm going to go through each category. I'm not voting in every single category, and I have specific thoughts about why, or specific thoughts about like I have things I might do with certain specific categories that I'll have to explain, that when people read online, they'll get mad at me because they won't know the context of everything. I'll get to that eventually. But I know it's probably going to take a while, just because, being a younger baby, and many of this is stuff that I have seen in real time. I say younger baby. I'm 29 years old, right? I'm a young guy, generally speaking, even though I have a wife and a house, and I'm very lucky in that regard. Humble brag. But a lot of this is stuff that's like in real time, and I think it is interesting. So we'll start with modern. I think it's just a little bit easier to get through, and also not only easier, I think it's going to be the longest to get through, just because I might have a lot of vague thoughts about everyone else. So let's go through this real quick. I'll do a little quick recap. I follow the modern performance in US and Canada. Canada 6 maximum votes. You have Mark and Jay Briscoe, Edge/Adam Copeland, Bill Dundee sticking out like a sore thumb, FTR, Bill Goldberg, Samoa Joe, Matt and Jeff Hardy, Becky Lynch, Drew McIntyre, Mercedes Moné/Sasha Banks, Jon Moxley, The Outsiders, Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, Randy Orton, Cody Rhodes, Seth Rollins, Sabu, Trish Stratus, and Rick and Scott Steiner. There are, I would say, 4 people. I'm going to use all 6 of my votes here. And there are 4 people I feel strongly about, for sure. And I'll start with Cody Rhodes. That's, I think, probably the easiest. I think he's a slam dunk Hall of Famer. I've been saying he's a slam dunk Hall of Famer since last year when he popped on the ballot. I think that there's a lot of different great things about his case. He is extremely historically significant, helping with the formation, the creation of AEW. It does so much in this category. I think being a part of the Bullet Club during, not necessarily the Bullet Club boom period, but in terms of like part of it in terms of exploding on an international scale, getting the hot topic with the Bullet Club and going and having All In, the 10,000 strong is pretty significant. And again, when I'm looking and talking about like historical significance, I'm sort of looking at it in a way of like, the canon of pro wrestling. When you talk about pro wrestling, who are you talking about? And you can't talk about the latter half of the 2010s than talking about the story of Cody Rhodes. right? It is undeniable, for lack of a better word, I guess. You cannot talk about him leaving WWE, going on these indies, writing the whole list, as corny as it was at the time. Him going to New Japan, going to Ring of Honor, linking up with the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega, and all these guys, and expanding this brand onto such a level where you're able to then turn it into AEW with the help of Tony Khan. It's extremely significant. It's extremely historically significant, and it's extremely positive. You create a whole nother company. And yes, he is 1/5, 1/6. I don't know how much points you want to give Tony Khan, but certainly a lot. He's a massive part of the movement towards. I think I've said it on Ring Post Radio, the other podcast I do with Scotty Edwards. I'd said it before, where the thing about Cody Rhodes in that whole Bullet Club, birth to AEW, is that to a certain degree he's the engine. In my viewpoint. I think a lot of the other stuff is what is flashy and nice, but when you have a great driving force that Cody certainly was, is the driving force per se the right intentions? Yes and no. I think maybe there's probably some intentional things that he was trying to go back to WWE and figure out ways to do it, and doing something like this would help. All these sort of things, but I don't know. I think that when you talk about Cody Rhodes, he's historically significant. And obviously as a draw, a couple years at top now as being the top guy of WWE for the past couple years, 2-3 years, however long it is great. Is it short? Yes. Is there guys like Goldberg where it's like a similar sort of length of time in terms of being like the big boy on the squad? Yeah. Is a similar length of time. We can talk about Goldberg a little bit later, but the thing about Cody is that it is rewriting the ship for WWE. It is taking the company into a different direction, attendance-wise. Obviously, TKO is a part of that. Nick Khan's a big part of that as well. I think the Peacock deal is obviously a big part of that in terms of all the business stuff. But, getting eyes on the product is all great and all, but having somebody that the crowd wants to stick around for helps significantly. And Cody was one of those guys. You can also say Roman, right, to a degree. You can say whoever else, I guess. But I think Cody was easily one of those guys, right? So I think that Cody, for me, even though his reign on top is very short, look, I can extend it. AEW, there's not really necessarily much on the bone there. There's still stuff there, but, removing him from the world title scene and making him sort of this like elevated upper mid-carder is sort of tough in terms of drawing attendance data and whatnot. But I can pinpoint stuff where, like, look, he was in Ring of Honor for that, 2017, 2018, whatever that year was. And look, he was the world champion for an entire year for Ring of Honor. And the company's biggest financial year to date at that point. Not to date, but at that point. And yes, I think Dave notes the popularity of the Elite and the Young Bucks. He also notes the help of bringing in New Japan talent to certainly do that. But look, Cody was also a big part of the Elite, and Cody was a big part of that Ring of Honor story of everything. And being the world champion for that year certainly makes him look good on paper. You can contextualize it all you want, but, when I'm looking back, I see Cody Rhodes as the world champion for the entire year, drawing big houses and having the biggest big houses for Ring of Honor standards, but the sort of thing of like, look, and I'm not saying this is like a massive deal, like for anyone else, it's like 1 year and he has so many other contextual, things about it, but look, it helps. I mean, you can maybe extend it at a year, but at best it's on a small indie level, right? Giving Ring of Honor the biggest financial year to date as world champion, along with all the other stuff, right? So I think like drawing is extremely big, even if it's short. I think historical significance is even bigger. Working ability, look, he's a solid enough worker, right? He's had great matches. He's had a plethora of great matches. I think he's had more 3-star general matches than great ones for sure. But he has done a really good job. And I do think he's like still better than most. Maybe better than most in a modern sense. Probably for sure. I think he is not necessarily like the most acrobatic, athletic dude, but he knows exactly what to do in the ring when he needs to do it. He's a really great promo, even if it's very similar and, seemingly forced, but he does it in a very natural, forced way, I guess. I just think that Cody Rhodes for me is like a slam dunk pick. He's really great. I'm voting Cody. Other people I'm voting for is going to be Jon Moxley. I think Jon Moxley, being a 2-time Luthez winner and not being in the Hall of Fame is pretty crazy. He's, again, a guy that's not necessarily going to be bringing you 5-star classics and be the most acrobatic, athletic dude, but he's a guy that knows what to do when he's in the ring. Sometimes I would argue he actually doesn't, because sometimes he gets too focused on these MMA things, but he's always been able to do what he's able to do significantly well within his like sort of brawler striker style. I would say it's a draw. He's draw for AEW. He is able to turn the ship and be the man that Tony Khan has to go to rewrite the ship in so many ways. Historically significant. He's a draw in the sense of also like he was the world champion as and sort of going into the company, making that big jump to AEW, help jump start that company to a degree in terms of excitement, right? So many ways, but that helped. Jon Moxley helped as well, and then sort of that story, that lead story of him going to fight Kenny Omega and then Chris Jericho win the world title, and then all that stuff. He's sort of the focus point of that first year, where not even getting through the full year, to Warner Media, just Warner Brothers, I guess, at the time, saying like, look, we're going to tear up our contract with AEW and we're going to give you something better because this is working. We want you deserve more money from us because we think we can get more money. We've been getting more money from you. Let's have a more fair deal, I guess. And that's great, right? And I think that's a great thing for Jon Moxley. Historically significant. I think he is like the heart and soul in terms of these first couple of years of AEW. I think the Shield is also a very important aspect of when you see it at the canon of the 2010s, early 2010s of WWE period. The WWE's, if you had to give anything, it's like this WWE stuff is like not necessarily as much there, but same thing with early Cody Rhodes. I don't know. Maybe it's a vibes thing with Jon Moxley. But I really like him as a candidate. Really the big sticking point of my crawl is that he's a 2-time Luthez winner. And is he going to be a winner this year? Probably not. I can't. Who am I voting for Luthez? It's not Cena. It doesn't feel like it should be Cody. Is there one in WWE? Maybe it's Cody. I'm Mystico. hold on. It's probably Mystico. Let's think this out. Great worker, great draw. It's got to be Mystico, right? I think it's got to be Mystico. Anyways. It's the game, maybe down Ballot Moxley, maybe, I don't know. But the fact that he's a 2-time winner is, I think, the most egregious thing. It's like, look, he's obviously a great wrestler, and I think that he has a lot of fringes, again, lack for a better word. He's a lot of fringes to his thing, and I think it's a little jagged and doesn't fit nicely into what most people want. The fact that is the case for Jon Moxley is hilarious. But I just, it's not necessarily something I can really pinpoint per se, but there's just like, look, the ripping up the contract when he's world champion and really that first year, if it wasn't for that, AEW might not even exist at this point anymore. AEW owes its existence to probably someone like Jon Moxley. If he didn't jump, who knows what the company would have done? Probably still would have done well, but who the heck knows? Would that TV deal? I don't know. Doesn't matter. Jon Moxley was the big deal. He was a world champion at the time when it happened. So he's a big deal for the company existing. That jump was pretty massive for the company. The Shield was pretty massive, in terms of historical significant, in terms of being something that was interesting, I guess, in those early 2010s. I don't know. Luthez winner 2 times. What more do you want me to say? He should be in. Lunatic Fringe, baby, should be in. Anyways, what are some other people I'm thinking about? Sabu, I'm voting for Sabu. Back returning to the Hall of Fame ballot here after his passing. I'm voting for Sabu. I really enjoyed putting together that Sabu audio, the sort of collage audio from a bunch of past guests on the ballot and future guests and people stepping in. I really enjoyed putting that together. I thought it was a really nice piece to hear all these thoughts and sort of conflicting moments at the time. And look, I said my piece to Sabu there. It's like, look, he's a guy that influenced Hayabusa, and Hayabusa is probably a Hall of Famer this year. He's a guy that is practically the innovator, probably the innovator, I don't know, of the table spot. He is a guy that, and obviously the table spot has morphed into something else differently, but it's this thing I said where, the table spot was something that made sense with Sabu. It wasn't just I'm like pulling out a table just because I'm pulling out a table to survive, to win, right? I'm pulling out a table to destroy my opponent. I'm being violent. The psychology of Sabu is that I am being violent because I'm not a good wrestler, right? That's practically it. He always tries, right, when he first starts wrestling. But part of it is that, like, his gimmick is that, like, look, I'm a bad wrestler, so I'm just going to take out weapons and beat you the hell up because I can, because I'm a suicidal maniac, right? So I think, like, using the psychology of the table spot and bringing it out and bringing it to modern stage is very important. And obviously, it's been modified and changed into more of the Vince McMahon version of what it should be, which is just to have it, And I think that's sort of the differences between the proliferation of the latter when it comes to like the Hardy brothers or even Edge and Christian, right? Versus Sabu. Like, I think there's even a difference between Sabu and like the Dudleys, right? In terms of table spots. Being that violent in ECW, he sort of got the rest of the company, which was always sort of violent, but he helped it, right? Him being a big time deal in Japan, him being a big time deal with his uncle, the original Sheik. Is he the best worker of all time? No, necessarily. But again, a guy that knows what to do with his skill set and be able to, and the sort of weird thing of being able to do it in a psychologically sound way, is pretty great. He's a pretty great guy, wrestler, dude. Historically significant in terms of bringing the table spot to pro wrestling. It's pretty massive. I get that there's sort of issues and sort of the long-term issues with all that stuff, but I really enjoy it. He has low-level indie draws in terms of being like a massive independent draw for the early to mid 90s. What was it, 92 to 94, I want to say? Where he 92, 93 at least. Where he's this big-time indie draw. Granted, it's an indie level, but look, he's a big-time indie draw. This is a period of time where he is just tape trading. It's not TV exposure. He is becoming a massive draw on practically his name. He's this mythos. He's this, just this guy that comes in. There's like there's a sort of like, I don't know, I guess maybe there's like an Abbey level thing there, or like a Bruiser Brody, where it's just like this guy comes in and you're just fascinated by him and you want to watch more of him. That was Sabu. That was Sabu for many years. The WWE stuff was interesting. The fact that it wasn't the first ECW One Night Stand, I want to say it was the second, where he is up against John Cena. Am I thinking of it correctly? I think it might have been the first. Because John Cena, Rob Van Dam. Either way, what I'm trying to say here is that, like, look, when they really start doing like ECW versus WWE stuff, it's Sabu versus Cena. It's also Sabu. It's also Rob Van Dam. Maybe that's what it is, because I think it happened at the exact same time. The TV stuff and some of the other stuff was Sabu and Vengeance. The WWE pay-per-view of it all was Sabu versus Cena. It was also Cena versus Rob Van Dam, but this is a guy that's also kind of already been around WWE for a while. Sabu, when you look at ECW, the best of a promotion, again, I go back to that, the best of promotions, best of these categories, Sabu is right there. The heart and soul, the soul of ECW, the Mount Rushmore, if you will, of ECW. A guy that, Rich, ignore this. Rich Craich, ignore this. A guy whose influence, Hayabusa, and look, influence can get thrown around a lot, and I think influence is important consideration when it comes to if you inspired someone if you influence someone that is pretty major, or at the very least someone of note in conversation, like Sabu influencing Hayabusa, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. I think that's important consideration for these sort of things, right? If you've inspired a future Hall of Famer, guy that's probably going to go in this year, then you should probably go in there. That would make sense to me. I think that's important consideration. So I don't know. I like Sabu a lot. I'm going to vote for him. So Moxley, Sabu, Cody, who was my fourth guy. Trish Stratus. No, not Trish Stratus. Who is my fourth guy? Oh, it's the Briscoes. Of course, it's the Briscoes. I have a theme with like the Briscoes and Sabu and stuff. The Briscoes, they are arguably the best tag team of the 2000s, even stretching into the 2010s. They are probably, I don't know. I mean, one of the best modern tag teams ever. I mean, the Young Bucks obviously beat them, probably. The plethora of quantity and quality of matches that they have had, the plethora of various opponents that they've wrestled, both in America and Japan and worldwide to all these sort of things. It's insane. It's insane. The amount of great matches that these boys have had. It's genuinely crazy to me. They have been able to have great matches in Noah and New Japan, and they've had some fun stuff in CMLL, but obviously Ring of Honor significantly. The last year of their run at a major level in Ring of Honor with FTR is so great. Their ladder wars, their stuff with Steen and Generico, Marufuji, and I want to say it was Kenta, probably. Oh, might have been. I want to say it was Kenta. Just great stuff. I mean, I just tell people, like, when people don't know who the Briscoes are, just watch their stuff. You'll know who the Briscoes are. Some of the just insanely great promos. Jay Briscoe can just look down a camera and send the fear of God into you, and Mark Briscoe will then come in and cluck like a chicken or something. I don't freaking know, man. He's Mark Briscoe. But he's just, like I said, one of the best tag teams in a modern sense, probably for the last 15, 20 years. If not number one, number two, easily. Probably the best of a certain decade of 2000. The drawing is obviously, it's Ring of Honor, but they were always the stalwarts. They were always the pillar of that company, of that brand. There was obviously things that kept them apart from other places. I have to imagine, obviously, alternate history I would love to live in, is that they were able to go to AEW, and I imagine they would have done really well there. They would fit like a fucking glove there. How do I know? Because Mark Briscoe fits like a glove. So yeah, it's historically significant. Look, they were the best tag team of the 2000s. I don't know what you want me to tell. They're great. They're just like a slam dunk. The Briscoes are someone like that, right? When I think of like slam dunk workers, I think of the Briscoes. They're so great as a tag team. Their ability to just their fluidity is insane. Going from spot to spot, it's so crazy to watch. The brawling, their ability to go to the depths of violence, quite easily, scarily, is commendable, and I appreciate it as a viewer. They're just so great. Man, this is where it's like the slam dunk, like people I'm voting for. It's just like, man, they're so great. I don't know what to say. They're so great. The Briscoes. So those are my 4 that 100% I'm voting for. The Briscoes, Cody Rhodes, Moxley, and Sabu. And I have 4 others that I've been floundering between to be my 2 other votes. And those 4 others are Punk, CM Punk, Samoa Joe, Becky Lynch, and Mercedes Moné. And those are my 4 others. And I only get 2 more votes. There's other people that are interesting. Probably, looking through the list again. I don't know. I don't know. Steiners are probably interesting. I don't know. There's something a part of me that's like, look, if I'm saying Cody for 2 to 3 years is Hall of Fame worthy draw, but Goldberg isn't, there's something there that I'm like, but then I'm like, well, yeah, but Goldberg, he's not really much of a wrestler, but again, able to do the minimum to an extreme degree, I guess. It's definitely historically significant. You can't talk about WCW without mentioning Goldberg. Anyways, nothing about Goldberg. But he's not in there. He's not in the top 8. And so I'm waffling between these 2. And realistically, I have sort of paired them off already in my head in sort of a Ring of Honor and a women's level here. I've paired it off as CM Punk and Samoa Joe versus Becky Lynch and Mercedes Moné. So, and I'll start with Becky Lynch and Mercedes Moné because I think that's the one that needs the most explanation. I think all 4 of these people are probably Hall of Famers. I think Becky Lynch is obviously the biggest female draw in the history of probably women's wrestling, generally speaking, at least a modern sense. But I mean, I doubt it was any bigger than back in the extreme historical June Byers days, right? I doubt it was any bigger than that. Granted, short period of time, can't deny that, but where that shortness falls, I think it earns in historical significance. The fact that a woman was the top star in the entire world, the biggest star in the entire world in terms of attendance and all that jazz, is massively historically significant. Oh boy, if you looked at the Mount Rushmore of women's wrestling through all time, is Becky Lynch on there? Oh boy. That's where it's like I need that historical brain here. I'll float that out there to see what people think. Mount Rushmore of women's wrestling all time, is Becky on there? I think there's a lot of reasons, like I said, I think there's a reason why. I mean, maybe it's got to be an amalgamation of her and Mercedes or the 4 Horsewomen or just Stephanie McMahon. I don't know. Trish Stratus, obviously up there. Joking. So I just feel like, look, it's this thing of she's historically significant, academically studied time frame, in terms of like college paper or whatever, not college papers, but report. What were they called? Reports? No, I don't know. I think she's a really solid wrestler. I feel like I'm higher on her wrestling than most other people. Do I think she's the best wrestler in the world? No, of course not. But I'm very high on her wrestling. The other end of that is Mercedes Moné, whereas Becky Lynch is the biggest women's draw probably in the history of wrestling, at least American wrestling, I guess. Mercedes is probably the best worker in the history of women's wrestling. Obviously we can't completely judge that, and it's in that sort of subjectivity is where you get more of those regional decade differences where it's like, how do you compare these sort of things? But I think that Mercedes is just a phenomenally great wrestler. I said at the time during her episode that I don't necessarily see her as like an elevator where she can necessarily have a great match with anyone, but she can have a great match with someone else who's really great. There are some times where she's more of a multiplier. It's that, like, look, if you're a great opponent, she will multiply and get a great match out of you. Is she somebody that will have a TV match and it's like, whatever, it's Mercedes Moné versus, I don't know, name someone that's just like kind of like whatever, and you'll get a like whatever match. I think like Will Ospreay, I saw like a great match with him and Matt Cardona, and that's the big difference there for me. That's the big sticking point I always throw out there. But since then, she's had gone on to have a great range of opponents, continued a great range of opponents, I should say, and have great matches throughout. I said at the time that I feel like she is working really hard to be historically significant, and at the time of this recording, she has had 12 titles under her waist, I guess, around her frat boys. And that is the most of anyone in the history of professional wrestling, at least that we know about. I presume it's probably the case to be accurate. 12 is the most, being the Ultimo, I always want to say Guerrero, Ultimo Dragon record of 10, right? Pretty significant. I think that the Brooklyn match is an extremely historically significant match in wrestling history. Obviously you have the Natalia Charlotte match beforehand that's sort of like a jump started, but then it got blown out of the water significantly by the Brooklyn match between Sasha Banks and Bayley. That really jump starts a lot of the women's wrestling, and that's the thing why Becky's so interesting too. And it's because I ultimately feel like these two women are two sides of the same coin. Whereas, it is that alley-oop thing, right? It's, Bayley, Sasha, throw it up one time for Becky Lynch, who then slams it home. I just think that there are two sides, and obviously you can throw in Ronda Rousey as being an important person here as part of this whole history as well. I think it's the three of them. I think it's the triumvirate there, ultimately, and I don't think Ronda will ever be on this Hall of Fame. It's interesting to have her on the ballot though, but it probably will never happen. Anyways, I really feel like they're two sides of the same coin, and that's how I sort of feel. Samoa Joe, I think he's a phenomenal wrestler. He's been a great wrestler, consistently great wrestler for a number of decades now. The problem with him is just that he's probably the weakest. He's probably number 8 for me, if I had to say so. The problem with him is just like, look, he's a guy that, he was in so many different promotions where he just wasn't used properly because he was just being booked by idiots. And the thing about Samoa Joe is that he's really good at saying yes to doing whatever he's told behind the scenes. And that's a great guy you want to have on that you're employing. But at the end of the day, you want him to be a little more selfish. You just want Samoa Joe to be a little bit more selfish. That's what I would want, certainly. This guy is a great worker and all, but he's just kind of booked to shit by Vince Russo and the whole TNA run practically. Not the whole run, but a good portion of it. WWE of Vince just not really being used. I would say he was used well in NXT. And AEW, I think he's doing that's the thing. So I feel like when he's used by a good booker, and I'll say Triple H was a good booker during that NXT period. Obviously, I won't say that anymore. I would say AEW, Tony Khan's a good booker, and I think he's using Samoa Joe effective, at least in terms of his age range. I think if he got Samoa Joe in his prime, Samoa Joe would be champion for a billion days. I don't know. The fact that he's like, oh, Samoa Joe would be in my AEW Hall of Fame, then I think that's pretty great. I think he's very significant. It's just he's just not ever been utilized properly in his career, and I can't necessarily vote in terms of the what ifs of it all, but I also can't deny that, look, this guy was a great worker, and he still is a great worker, and he's still able to rewrite ships in terms of attendance and whatnot, to a degree, with AEW. Like I said, to a degree. And when he's pushed, he's a great promo, Hall of Fame promo guy. Jesus Christ. And yeah, I would love if this guy, I was listening to the Gordy list that Rich put together for Voice of Wrestling Patreon, and talking about Samoa Joe, and it's like, damn, I wish this guy influenced more people. And that's the other problem, is that there's so many people on this ballot, all, on all these different regions, that I wished influenced more people, but they just didn't. And there's still time to tell, because a lot of them are still happening and still valid and still modern and still wrestling today. But it's just like, damn, why are more people wrestling like this? And it's just a different time. It's just what it is. But Samoa Joe's great. He has a sort of Briscoe Brothers effect on me in terms of length of being great. and length of being great and promo level and wrestling, basically wrestling ability. I think he's like a guy that can be argued as a slam dunk worker. I think he just has the sort of issues of, just not being used properly per se, and not having, and just being sort of spotty because of being used by inept people. And then the other one's Punk. I think Punk is like 5. If I had to say, like, those are the guys with the top 4, Punk is like 5. And I'll explain why I'm weary about Punk. Punk, look, great worker, great talker, historically significant, first 5-star for WB and however long. First, you can't talk about the pipe bomb and all this sort of stuff. You can't talk about WWE at those time periods. I was talking about Punk. The fact that he is probably one of the biggest stars of obviously the 2010s, but that I think extends into the 2020s. The fact that he can go away for a number of years and draw that big for AEW shows to me, for that long too. It wasn't just like a one-time pop or a 1 month pop. It was multiple months where CM Punk was a big time draw. It's like almost like the Becky Lynch thing, where it's like a short period of time. Punk is like, he's gone away for 7 years, but he constantly remained in the public wrestling fans' public consciousness, and that when he comes back, he's a massive draw, big time deal, big time star, and he builds up the company exceedingly for a number of years. He's a reverse Becky Lynch in the sense that, like, him being away certainly maybe hurts his case, but the fact that he was still around and never left, that he is arguably one of the biggest stars in wrestling despite not being in it, is pretty crazy. I think that's pretty significantly crazy to think about. He is a guy that was always around, constantly being chanted, constantly being desired and wanted because he was a big star. He's a big deal for WWE at the time. He's a great worker. He's a great worker in Ring of Honor and WWE, obviously, and AEW. He's still a great worker now. And obviously, look, I don't like whatever obviously went down with AEW. And obviously it significantly hurt the company with him having to brawl out and leaving the company. But since being back in WWE, things are working well, and he's bringing his wife back into the company, and AJ Lee, and he's a draw, and he's a great worker, and he's a great talker, and he's like weirdly a yes man in a lot of ways, which is very fun to watch. There's just like so many things. It's like, yeah, CM Punk's pretty solidly a Hall of Famer. He's gonna get in this year, and that's kind of where I'm at, and why I have struggled is that I sort of feel like Becky Lynch is my 6. The problem is that I feel like, and this is pure conjecture, but I feel like with Becky Lynch and Mercedes being two sides of the same coin, I feel like there is a good chance that people are going to pick between the two of them. And because of that, it's going to eat up Becky's votes. I sort of fear that because Becky voters are going to look at Mercedes and vote for Mercedes over Becky because they think her case is stronger. They won't necessarily vote for both because I think the modern case candidacy here is pretty, filled with a lot of people. I named 8 that I'm thinking about. And there's so many other people that people obviously heavily consider or vote for. So it's the sort of thing of like, I fear that, and this is where like the sort of meta issues that I'm currently having, and I'm still thinking about it in this moment. I'm talking it out with you, my Audacity app, is that, look, Punk's going to go in. Why don't I just vote for Mercedes and Becky Lynch together? Why don't they just become 5 and 6 for me and vote for the two of them? Because I fear that their votes they're going to swallow each other up. And do I think they're necessarily going to fall at the ballot? Not necessarily. I mean, what did Becky get? I mean, Becky was not the highest last year, I don't think. 25.2%. She's going to do better, I think. But I also feel like she could easily get swallowed up by Mercedes Moné voters. I think people instantly, in any all these discords or conversations I see, it's like people immediately compare the two. And I think the comparing the two breeds contrasting the two. And I think that voters are going to pick one over the other. And I think past Becky voters are going to vote for Mercedes instead. That's my fear. And my thought process is, why don't I just vote for these two women instead of Punk? Because he's going in. The other side of this coin is, why don't I just vote for Punk? Because he's a slam dunk. He's a yes for me. He's like, I should vote for Punk. And I feel like I should vote for the people I'm more confident in versus the people where, their cases are still very much developing. I mean, Mercedes is very young, 32, I want to say. Becky Lynch, she is in her 30s as well. 38. I mean, Becky cases could be done. And that's the other thing that worries me and this is the person, I'm going to shout him out because he's the person that's been screwing up my mind for the past couple days. It's Fred Moreland of the Good, the Bad, the Hungry podcast. He did an episode of the show talking with Adam Berger, past and future guest. Fred Moreland, I guess, also past and future guests. I should shout out. I gotta message Fred back. I hope Fred's listening to this. Fred, please know that I have to message you back because I'm pretty sure I never messaged you back. I can check right now, but I want to focus on this. So the thing that he said that really screwed with my mind, Fred, is that, and it's so ironic that Fred did this because most of our episode was talking about women's wrestling in the Hall of Fame, and it sucks that Fred's been the one that's screwing with my brain. But he said something to the effect of basically like, look, Becky Lynch has had a great peak, 2018, 2019, really 2019, and then the pandemic halts. She gets pregnant. Pandemic obviously does this pandemic thing. It takes her a while to come back, obviously. And then she comes back, and she's practically been a heel, right? And where she has, broken the glass ceiling for women's wrestling, she is like a big star, but also like Io, Ripley, Bianca Belair start getting moved up, obviously, in her absence. So she's like still a big star. She's also a heel and all these sort of things. And it's just sort of like, what has her career been after the fact? And it's been weaker. And like, if I remove, and this is a big remove, it's a big what if removal. If I remove 2019 from Becky Lynch's Becky Lynch's career, is she a Hall of Famer? Like beforehand, she is not necessarily, I wouldn't say a Hall of Famer. Afterwards, probably not either. But you can't remove that because that's an important aspect of her case. But at the same time, since she's come back as a heel, mainly, she hasn't really done much. I think if she's added anything, it's work. I think like the Tiffany match she had in NXT was very strong. Drawing, I guess, of NXT as well. She was the only star they really sent down there that had any sort of significance drawing, television ratings to help them get that CW contract. So that's something that adds to the case, I guess. But I don't know. There's something about it's like, well, yeah, afterwards, it's just like they're not really doing much with her. And there's not, you could remove her and it's fine. It's really the Rhea Ripley Io Sky show. And is Bianca third? She should be third. Is she third? Oh, it's probably Tiffany at this point, right? I mean, which is a person that Becky helped make to a degree in NXT. I don't know. It's this thing where I'm struggling with Fred really bumped up my brain. I forget what his actual quote was. He said in the episode basically that all that stuff, that like, her return back has not really necessarily been the greatest. And, look, I think like when the case has been made for Becky and it's very short and afterwards it's tough. And I really want to vote for Becky. I really want to vote for Mercedes. I want to vote for Joe. I can only vote for two. This is where me figuring this out in real time is. I mean, and that's why I split it. I think you vote for both women, Becky and Mercedes, or you vote for Samoa Joe and CM Punk. If I split it, it's like CM Punk versus Becky or Mercedes. Mercedes is also so young. She has so much more of a case that she's going to develop by saying that she wants to become a historical wrestler. That's going to just develop with more time. There's no point in voting for her now. Becky's case is probably majority done at this point. And it's a question of, is she a Hall of Famer? I think like high peak is so incredibly high, but it is so short. Punk feels like a slam dunk vote for me. Samoa Joe, I want to vote for so badly. Is it a vibes thing? Is it what is it? Ugh. All right. I'm going to do the thing, and I hate myself for this. I'm going to vote. I'll do Punk and Mercedes. No. Really struggling, folks. I'm not going to cut any of this out because I really want to make this struggle real. Not real, but you know what I mean. At one point in time, I went on to Ring Post Radio and said I'm voting for Becky and Mercedes. I could vote for Punk. I think he's going in. I don't think it matters, so why not vote for Mercedes and Becky? Even if Mercedes falls off, I think there's a good chance Mercedes will go back on. So is there any point in voting for Mercedes? Sasha Banks? Is there any point for Becky? Is there an argument for voting for 5? Hold on, let me think. That I cannot make a decision between the 3, so I don't vote for any of them, and I just vote for Punk. Let's think. Yes, obviously you can vote for Punk then. Then it's a question of, like, look, is Becky Lynch's case probably done? Yes. Do I think it's a Hall of Fame case? I would consider it so. Probably Mercedes, I think, is incredibly strong. Is the meta conversation getting too much into the way of things? Yes. I'm just going to say it right here just so I can move on. This is why I give myself the excuse of 99% accuracy in this Hall of Fame ballot. I'm going to give myself the hard task. I'm going to vote for Punk. It'll be Punk, Cody, the Briscoes, Moxley, and Sabu. And I will vote for... I feel like I lean work rate. I think that's part of my nonsense. Mercedes doesn't really have like any sort of drawing case and historical. I like the idea of the screaming people. It's like Samoa Joe, Becky. I think I'm gonna vote. I think I'm gonna vote for Becky. Becky over Mercedes. Mercedes is so great. She's still so much time left of her career. She's still so incredibly young. I don't necessarily feel like she's going to fall off. I do fear that both are going to be affected. And I fear, like, look, the thing is that, like, I feel like if Becky falls off, she falls off. I don't necessarily feel like we're adding anything. If Mercedes falls off, I think she can be added back on. She's still so young, still so much more. I think the historical seed she's planting could eventually bear fruit, even more so. I think I'm going to lean Becky over Samoa Joe as well. I mean, Becky is just so historically significant. You can't talk about 2010s, especially late 2010s WWE, without talking about the Women's Revolution and culminating in the WrestleMania main event with Becky Lynch on top. Tough decisions for me. I don't like it, but I'm gonna be happy with it in this moment. 99%. I give myself the opening to change my mind, but at this moment, I think modern US and Canada for me is gonna be Punk, Cody, Briscoes, Moxley, Becky, Sabu. Other people that I like, obviously, I talked about Samoa Joe. I talked about Mercedes. FTR is a team that I think can grow on me as time persists, but I do think they need a little bit more. I think they are solid. Like, they're probably my top half for sure. Steiners are also probably my top half. You know, people I don't give a crap about. Drew, Trish, Seth Rollins. Bill Dundee just sticks out like a sore thumb. Just I don't know why he's here. It just feels so weird that he's here. Outsiders I don't give a crap about. And then like the weird, like, I don't freaking know, shoulder shrug of Randy Orton, Adam Copeland, Goldberg, and the Hardys. That's the big shoulder shrug. It's the Trish, outsiders, Drew, Seth Rollins. These are all the people like, no. Hand waving. Get out of here. So that's that. That's my modern. Punk, Cody, Briscoes, Moxley, Becky, Sabu. That's what I'm currently feeling. That's what I'm currently vibing with. We'll see how that goes. How long have I been talking? How long have I been recording? An hour and 15-ish. All right, perfect. Well, then let's move into a category that I'm definitely not voting in. That way we can get through it fairly quickly. And one of those categories is Mexico. I'm not going to vote in Mexico. In Mexico, I'm not fluent enough in Mexico history to really say so. We obviously did the episode on Los Infernales, El Centenico, Prata Morgan, MS1. And I do think they're like a very historically significant team. They've been a team that they themselves haven't been a team, but the fact that their name, even though it existed before those three members in a small capacity, and it has been around, but it has been around since modern day, is pretty great. I like that a good amount. But they're not necessarily like, yes. You only get 3 votes. The people in here, I should say, are Angel Blanco and Dr. Wagner, Sangre Chicana, El Dandy, Dorel Dixon, Gran Hamada, Los Infernales, like I said, El Hijo del Santo and Octagon, La Parca from AAA, Mascarita Sangrada, and Volador Jr. If I did use my 3 votes, it would probably be for Dorel Dixon, Gran Hamada, and Mascarita Sangrada. That is probably who I would vote for. That is who I'm currently vibing with. But again, I don't feel confident enough with all these names. Like Volador, I'm interested in. Los Infernales, I'm interested in. La Parca, Dandy, I don't really know. Santo and Octagon, not really. And I feel like, Sangre Chicana and Angel Blanco and Dr. Wagner, I just got to do more research on and stuff. But Gran Hamada, the pure Rusu, is so strong for him. Mascarita Sangrada, the best mini of all time. More than likely, the footage I've seen, the history that we've done, the best mini of all time, undeniable. Dorel Dixon, massive deal in terms of just like a black man in Mexico. If I recall correctly from listing one of these things, this was a time where like segregation, I believe, or was really significant in Mexico history or Mexican culture. But the fact that he was able to break through is pretty crazy. Also pretty good draw, which is pretty great for both Mexico and like Texas. He's really up there. Like I said, Gran Hamada is really up there as like a great worker. And obviously like a grandfather, an entire style that has really come together in a modern sense. Obviously a lot of different other things, but pretty significant in terms of that modern sense. Those are probably the big 3 that I would be looking at if I did vote in Mexico, which I am not. I'm not going to vote in Mexico. I would like to at some point, but we'll see. We'll see. Who is there? Who are these sort of? Who else could get added to Mexico? I wonder. Be a matter of who goes in, I guess. But we'll see. We'll see what happens there. Those would be the 3 people I vote for, but I'm not going to vote in Mexico. There are 6 categories, and I do feel like I should discuss one more. And so I will discuss Japan, I believe. Yeah, I'll discuss Japan because that's also a smaller category, and we have a little bit of time left, and I'll save the rest for a part 2. Just because historical has a lot of people in it, and I have a lot of, and I'm definitely voting in, I believe, rest of the world and non-wrestlers, and non-wrestlers is going to be a whole conversation. So let's go with Japan. I'm definitely voting in Japan this year. This year as opposed to any other year when I did have a ballot. The acts are as follows: Satoshi Kojima and Hiroshi Tenzan, Yoshiaki Fujiwara, Hayabusa, Masaki Mochizuki, Antonio Inoki and Seiji Sakaguchi, Zack Sabre Jr., Meiko Satomura, Io Shirai, Tigerjeet Singh, Yoshihiro Takayama, Manami Toyota, and Toshio Yamada. You only get 3 votes in Japan. The 3 people I am voting on, and I've decided, I'm not even Not even thinking about, not in terms of, not necessarily not thinking about other people. But I feel strongly about 3 people. They're Hayabusa, Io Shirai, and Masaki Mochizuki. Obviously, we did episodes about Io Shirai and Masaki Mochizuki. I think Io Shirai is a great worker and has been for a decade, 2 decades, maybe decade and a half. WWE run helps it really well. Probably one of the best wrestlers in WWE this year, 2025. But a great wrestler in her Stardom run. I redid my Stardom attendance data a little bit analysis because I did that for that episode. And when I did the Mochizuki one, I felt that it was more accurate. So I wanted to reflect that because I felt like I think it didn't give Io Shirai a fair shake when I did that one. So I'll redo that data point. So longevity on top, Io Shirai, and obviously we're doing longevity on top first just because pre-Bushi Japanese wrestling stuff. Longevity on top in her time frame of being in Stardom from 2011 to 2018 for Io Shirai. She is number 2, right behind Anai Takahashi. She is number 2. Right, the top 5 are Nanai, Io Shirai, Mayu Iwatani, Natsuki Taiyo, and Momo Watanabe, who does really well in this first couple of years, which is very interesting to me. Top 5 placements, she ties with Mayu Iwatani. Of top 5 placements being that, like, look, in any given year, let's say 2012 for example, are you ranking in the top 5 draws of that year based on the attendance data? Io Shirai ranks in 5 of those years. These years obviously are 2011 to 2018. These are 8. She ranks 5 out of 8 years. Mayu Iwatani also ties in that same vein at 5. So she's she's longevity on top. She was used consistently. Not really a shocker. Let's throw in attendance. This is average attendance by percentage longevity on top, practically. So this is like what sort of your, if I take all the attendance data of you in main and semi-main event matches, which is all my data comes from, is main event and semi-main event matches. And let's say if you're in there, let's look at the attendance data. Let's take up what's the average number of your attendance data, basically, of the attendance data that you were either in the main event and semi-main event. And let's, that's your average attendance number. Was it higher or lower than the average attendance of the year? That tells me, look, you're a pretty good draw, right? But that's just average attendance. What is the average attendance by the longevity on top? Were you a really big draw and consistently used in the company? That would tell me that you're a pretty big deal. And how Io Shirai ranks there, of course, in those 8 years of 2011 to 2018. She ranks, again, number 2 behind Nanai Takahashi. The top 5 there this time around are going to be Nanai Takahashi, Io Shirai, Natsuki Taiyo, Yoko Bito, and Kagetsu. Pop it up there. Very interesting enough. Top 5 placements, same as before. She ties with 5. This is the number 1, I should say. Same thing with longevity on top. With 5, with Kairi Hojo. So what that tells me is that she was used consistently on top, and she drew consistently, and she was one of the top draws in Stardom. Now, obviously, Stardom is a extremely small promotion. It is a promotion that this is all nice and grand and all for Io Shirai to be a part of this company, but at the same time, the company does not grow at all with her being there. It just doesn't matter, right? It's great that she's a top draw in the company, and that's pretty dead set on that being the case, but the company does not grow at all. I think that says more about Rossy Ogama, perhaps, but I think no matter what, her case is pretty much going to be work rate case. She's a great worker. Has been for practically 10, 15, 20 years at this point. And I would like to vote for her. Is she the best worker in this category? Probably not, but I like her a lot. I just like her a lot. I just like Io Shirai a lot. That's at the end of the day, that's what I'm voting for. And I think that Io Shirai be on the ballot, and there's going to be open conversation moving forward about Joshi wrestlers. Meiko Satomura has always been here for a while now, and the more historical ones, but now we're getting to the modern sense. And I would like to vote for Io. And And, maybe there's a point in not voting for her because her case is still developing in terms of a WWE scale. But, hey, she's succeeding there. She's such a natural babyface that she succeeds anywhere she's at. And they very much like her. Hayabusa, I enjoy. Same reasons I enjoy Sabu, I enjoy Hayabusa, even though his style is just a little bit different. Obviously, there's the sort of drawing thing that people like to knock on of, like, look, it's after Onita. But, like, weirdly enough, I think, like, the same thing applies to Zack Sabre Jr., where people knock on Zack Sabre Jr. for not being a big enough draw. But it's like, buddy, you followed Naito, like a slam dunk Hall of Fame draw. Of course it's going to drop. Of course it's going to drop after Naito. The New Japan didn't have anyone. And to a certain degree, after Onita left FMW, they didn't have anyone that can be that sort of big-time draw, right? They went to Hayabusa. They went to Zack Sabre Jr. And I did waffle between Zack Sabre Jr. and Hayabusa. Ironically, two people that are on opposite sides of the spectrum. For some reason, I felt stronger about Io Shirai than Zack Sabre Jr. People might disagree with that. But that's how I feel. My ballot. But Hayabusa is really great. I think he's going to go in. I think he is just great. The fact that his working ability was so not of the time, but of the now, is pretty crazy. The fact that they brought back the character and he fits like a glove in his working style is emblematic of how Hayabusa was ahead of his time. I like Hayabusa a lot. Zack Sabre Jr. is not someone I'm going to be voting for, but he's someone I really wanted to vote for. I think once Hayabusa goes in next year, I'll become a Zack Sabre Jr. voter. I think the sort of like, look, like I said, the fact that he followed Naito is nothing, he's going to be down no matter what. But I do want to see just like one more year of Zack Sabre Jr. because I want to see if it turns around at all, or see rather how he does a year removed, so that we're not comparing him year over year to Naito stuff, but year over year to his stuff potentially, if he's still around. Plus, as like Alan Farrell said on the Mochizuki episode, that like I think he's coming up on perhaps an inflection point of his career, a three-way split between staying in New Japan forever, moving the WWE, or moving to AEW, and I think that's going to be a fascinating thing to look out. Mochizuki, Alan, he made me Mochizuki pilled. He made me Mochi pilled. Look. The guy is like one of the best workers of the past 30 years, 20 to 30 years, right? How is that not a Hall of Fame slam dunk working case? How is it not? Explain to me how it's not. Obviously, it's subjective, but look, he's had great matches. Like, highly rated great matches for like 20, 30 years. That's crazy. That is probably more than anyone else in this ballot. And that's just me thinking off the top of my head. Let me look around. Japan probably beats everyone. Japan, Mexico. Probably the best there would be Volador Jr., perhaps. And I don't think he gets to that length, that longevity of top level stuff. Modern, the Briscoes, but I think they're only like really a decade and a half. Nope, no one else in modern I can think of. Historical. No. Historical is never going to be an easy thing to look at in terms of working ability. Rest of the world, I don't think so either. He's probably the longest, best wrestler here. And look, longevity should be a prime consideration rather than a hot 2 or 3 year run, unless someone is so significant as a trendsetter or historical figure in this business or valuable to the industry that they need to be included. However, just longevity without being either a long-term main eventer or a top draw or a top caliber in-ring performer should be seen as relatively meaningless. So longevity with while being a top caliber in-ring performer should be seen as relatively important, if I had to reverse my negatives here, right? He was a top in-ring worker for 20 to 30 years. That's longevity, baby. What do you want me to say? Slam dunk Hall of Fame worker. Masaki Mochizuki. I'm pilled. What can I say? What can I say? I'm not even like the biggest like Dragon Gate guy. I'm pilled. He's great. Again, it's these guys that are great. The fact that I can sit here and Alan's like, yeah, look, he had a great match of Yamato in like 2015 or whatever, 2021 or whatever it was. I'm like, yeah, I watched one from like 2011 and he was fucking great. Oh yeah, it was like he had a great match. He's like, I gave him like a 4-star plus match in 2025. I was like, yeah, I just watched the match from 2015. He was freaking great too. I gave him the same rating, same opponent, same guy, still great. Yeah, I don't know. Mochizuki's a great wrestler for such a freaking long time. Drawing, he still does pretty well. I mean, if you're looking at that Dragon Gate attendance report I put together, obviously it was just for his initial run. I have looked at, I believe it was the Open the Voice Gate guys, specifically Mike Spears sort of put together his own Dragon Gate attendance stuff. I opened my thing and not Discord, and I did not spell Discord correctly. Yeah, with my things of longevity on top for those first 8 years as well, 2004 to 2011, 2011 being his big world title run. He ranks 9th overall in those first couple years longevity on top with 4 top 5 placements that tops the Doi, Susumu, and Yamato. Obviously, Shimo and Masato Yoshino do better than him. That's just longevity on top. Throw in the attendance data, which, look, some people say you throw them out because they're pre-Bushiroad and everyone's lying. And I say, as far as I can tell, they kind of correlate. So I don't necessarily per se agree, I guess. But look at average attendance. What do you got? You got Masaki Mochizuki. This is average attendance by percentage on top. Average attendance by longevity on top. Masaki Mochizuki is ranked 3rd. Shima, Sugawara, and Mochizuki. He's ranked 3rd. Top 5 placements. He is ranked tied 3rd, I guess, as well. 4th? I don't know. With Yamato at top 5, 4 placements of half his time. He's a top 5 worker. Yeah, I guess you can say. He's a draw for the company. This is a company that has obviously done better business than Stardom. That period of 2004 to 2011, this is when the company is the best it's done attendance-wise. He is a guy that in his time period of those 8 years, over 1,100 matches, he has had 144 main events. 12% of those first 8 years, he's having a 1,000-plus attended main event. It's pretty crazy. 12% of the time. He's had multiple thousands main eventers. Those are the ones I'd be more questioning. You know, the 6, 7, 8, 9,000 shows are the one to be obviously more questioning. But look, they're probably still really good. You know, they're not going to say like there's like 1,000 people in attendance. They're going to say it's 10, say it's 9,000, right? You know, that's always these things. It's like people just like throw out the number and be like, oh, I'll throw it out. It's bad. All these sort of things. You know, if they're just blowing up the big show. What percentage are they blowing up? Are they going to say that 1,000 people in the crowd are 10,000 people? No. And I do know that gets a little dicey at times. It's like, oh yeah, that's definitely not this number. But it's not a crazy number, you know? I would say that it would presume to be fair that most of their bigger numbers are still probably the biggest numbers of that year. For Dragon Gate, right? For any of these companies. It's just a question of by how much. I think it's the better question. And Mike Spears for Open the Voice Gate has put together a lot of stuff and saying that, like, look, it looks like it's the connections are mostly with the big shows. It's not necessarily every single show that they're pumping up the data points there. Was I able to get to Mike Spears' Google Sheet fast enough? No, but I'm looking at it now. All right. He has like 1 billion, and this is the Torimon stuff. This has way more data than I even have. He somehow did it faster. I think he had help. He did have help. He had Chris Sampson help. Dragon Gate singles matches. Is this stuff that is? Oh, this is just not anything over over 1,000 attendance. This is just Dragon Gate singles matches that he's had. Dragon Gate singles main events that he's had, and he has had 54. Pretty good. Pretty good. Toryumon over 5,000. Obviously, this is where you get some of the dubious stuff. Capacity, it looks like you have 3 over 5,000. Toryumon over 1,500. He's had 47. Pretty good. Pretty good. I just sort of think that like he's a slam dunk Hall of Fame guy. Sadly, not as influential, just like Samoa Joe, that I would like. I'd like him to be more influential. The fact that he isn't more influential in terms of like the Dragon Gate striker stuff is interesting. Right? I mean, the guy's been around there forever and been wrestling there for all these guys. Why is he not more influential there? I don't know. I don't think because he's not a trainer, so I think that's probably a big part of things. And his style, his style being a sort of like striker stuff is sort of the foil to the high flying athletic acrobatic stuff, or the lucha inspired stuff for the Dragon Gate guys. So it's almost like a foil. I just think he's like the flag bearer, pillar, all this sort of jazz of Dragon Gate, and I would vote for Mochizuki. Everyone else on there, I mean, like Zack Sabre Jr. I'm very high on. Tiger Jeet Singh is a very interesting case. Meiko Satomura, I like her a lot, but like it's more of a vibes thing. I don't know. Kojima and Tenzan, get out of here, full off already. Nogi and Sakaguchi, it's just so weird. Them in like non-wrestlers is interesting. Fujiwara is interesting. Takayama is interesting. Like, these people that are interesting, but like, I don't know. Hayabusa, Saki Mochizuki, Io Sky, pretty interesting. I like them a lot. I get maybe I should vote for Io Shirai and vote for Zack Sabre Jr. instead. Should I? Scotty would be so mad at me if I did that. I don't know. Should I vote for Zack Sabre Jr. instead of Io Shirai? Hayabusa, Zack Sabre Jr., Masaki Mochizuki. Or Hayabusa, Io Shirai, Masaki Mochizuki. Zack Sabre Jr. has been... I'm going to pull up my old Zack Sabre Jr. notes. Let's do a quick adjustment on the fly. Let's look up my Io Shirai notes. Working ability, top 5 singles matches. Satomura, Hojo, Iwatani, Satomura. These are all over 9.25. Top 5 singles matches rated by Meltzer. She's had 1 5-star at the time of writing all that notes down in WWE. That was the WrestleMania triple threat from this year. But she's had several 4.5, 4 3/4. Hi Shishida, Iwatani. She's about to have another one that's against Iwatani this year. Best wrestler, women's wrestler of the 2010s, arguably into the 2020s. That's best women's wrestler. That has more than Mercedes Moné. Probably one of the best women's wrestlers ever. And one of the best overall in 2010s is what I wrote. I wrote down also reminds me of Kurt Angle. I don't remember if I said that. There's something about her that reminds me of Kurt Angle. Obviously, not really high flyer, but you catch the drift. Let's see. Where's my old? The Ballot. That's Ballot 2025. Where is the Ballot? Here we go. Zack Sabre Jr. Cage match top 5. Danielson. This is when I wrote it last year. Danielson Sabre, Walter Sabre, O'Reilly Sabre, Strong Sabre, Ospreay Sabre. That's all 5 different people. Io Shirai had 3 different people in the top 5. Observer, Danielson, Ospreay, Walter, A-Kid, Ospreay. That's 4 different people. And for Dave's top 5, it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different people, I guess. There was a triple threat, but 6. Great tag team wrestler. Both are really good tag team wrestlers. Thunder Rock, Dangerous Techers. A lot of great matches. Like I said, probably the best British wrestler not named Will Ospreay, at least in a modern sense. Best technical wrestler not named Bryan Danielson, at least in a modern sense. Several tag titles. 7-time Bryan Danielson Award winner. Io Shirai 2020 Observer Award, 6th place Women's Wrestler MVP, 5th place in 2019, 7th place Best Flyer in 2018, 10th place Most Outstanding Wrestler in 2017, 2016 8th place Most Outstanding Wrestler, 9th place Tag Team of the Year of Iwatani. Drawing power, she does pretty well, but the company never grows. Zack Sabre Jr., he comes in, and I feel like there is some data that suggests he's drawing, but nothing at a high level that's anything anywhere consistently. Both are pretty weak in drawing comparatively. If the thing I wrote about Io Shirai is that if you're one of the top draws in the company, but business is declining around you, then are you really a draw? Zack Sabre Jr., if you're one of the, just in the most modern sense, if you're a top draw in the company, but the company's not, the business is declining around you, then are you a draw? Very similar cases to a certain degree. Zack Sabre Jr. has good matches as far back as Io Shirai. Does Io Shirai have more great matches than... I'm going to cage match this, and the problem is cage match is going to make it difficult because of ratings and Joshi wrestling ratings, both being slightly overrated, but also underrated. Overrated in terms of score, but underrated in terms of voters. All right, let's see. This is what everyone's hoping for, is to close out this episode, me deciding between these two. And my thought process. Did anyone want to think about the thought process, the conversation of it all? This is me having it. Let's look at let's look at matches, I guess. I guess match guide is really what I want. Let's look at, what am I looking at? Io Sky. Let's just look at minimum rating for cage match from 8 to 9.99 and see what we get. We get 65 matches between, cage match voter 4 to 5 stars, right? The latest is 2025, obviously. The earliest here is 2010, and then really starts kicking off in 2013. Let's look. So that was 65. Let's look at Zack Sabre Jr. I feel like I just wrote in Zack into Google. That's not even close to what I need to do. I feel like Zack Sabre Jr. is going to beat her here just because of the cage match stuff. And it sucks that it's probably going to come down to this, but it probably will. Let's see. We'll go 8 minimum rating to 9.99. I should do minimum number of votes. Does she have any Io Sky have any ridiculously low number of votes? She had it as low as 18, 17. I would probably cut off at least at 10. I don't know. If 10 people recommended me that this was a great match, I'd probably say, yeah, I should probably watch that. Zack Sabre Jr. Oh boy, he has 3 pages, 203 items. Oh boy, oh boy. He smokes her. 203, 65 to 203, smokes her. So that's all the way from 2025. She started 2025 to 2013, 2010 with one match. He starts in 2009. So he has, in theory, more matches highly rated in a longer period of time than Io Shirai. Looking good for old Zacky boy. Historical significance. She's one of the best women's wrestlers ever. Ever. Can't discuss Stardom without discussing Shirai on the Mount Rushmore of Stardom talent. With Io Shirai really being the first true Stardom talent going on the Observer Hall of Fame ballot, it brings up the question of whether or not Stardom is a historically significant company. Rossi is really fighting that. historically significant. I don't really have any much time because I didn't really figure out the show format, and I did it first with Zach, but he doesn't really have much. I mean, he has a lot of accolades, which is really nice. New Japan World TV titles. He's won tournaments like the title tournament, the New Japan Cup twice at the time I wrote this in 2024. The G1 Climax semifinalists from 2017 to 2021. The Cruiserweight Classic semifinalist in 2016, obviously. He's won many titles. New Japan World TV title, the IWGP World title twice, 3-time IWGP Tag Team Champion. These are all titles, I'm leaning Zach. Damn. I think I'm leaning Zach. I think I convinced myself for Zach. I think he's there. He's very similar to EO. And I think he just has like a little bit more than her. I think that's what I'm doing. God damn, I did not expect that. I suspected this to be a super quick one, and I would be locked in. I've changed my mind. I reserve the right to change it again before I submit the ballot, and people are more than welcome to tell me off and convince me the other direction. But damn, I switched my mind. Japan, Hayabusa, Zack Sabre Jr., Masaki Mochizuki. That's who I'm thinking. That's who I'm going to vote for right now. And that's it for this week's episode. Because I got to go. It's 10 o'clock when I'm recording. My wife wants to go to bed. I want to go to bed. My cats are hungry and they need to be fed. Or else they'll barge down the door with his 20-ass pound cat. Jesus Christ. So yeah, that's as much as I can get through in this episode. I've got through 3 regions. There'll be another episode out next week. This is coming out tomorrow. I gotta edit this and release this too. Oh boy, oh boy. So the plan is for this to come out tomorrow on the 22nd. And then there will be another episode on the 29th. And then there'll be a week off. And then the ballots are due on the 8th. If I do anything else, we'll find out. I couldn't get to Bill Mercer. If I'm able to get a Bill Mercer episode, I'll squeeze something in, but I highly doubt it at this point. I emailed and contacted a bunch of people, and they all did not respond. I believe Alan Forel is the only person that knows who 100% he suggested that I messaged, and he did not even respond to me. That's fine. That person also might be listening and might reach out finally. But hey, I would love to do that. if you're listening and reach out to me, talk Bill Mercer, I'll be down. Door's always open. Anyways, I did 3 categories: modern, and I'm voting in modern, and I'm voting CM Punk, Cody Rhodes, Briscoes, Moxley, Becky Lynch, Sabu. Mexico, I'm not going to vote. In Japan, Hayabusa, Zack Sabre Jr., Masaki Mochizuki. Next week, we'll talk rest of the world. We'll talk historical U.S. and Canada, and we'll talk, of course, non-wrestlers. So many non-wrestlers. That much and more next week on the ballot. Until then, subscribe to the podcast wherever you get them. Thank you, everybody, for those shout-outs. I got a lot of nice shout-outs through this Hall of Fame season that I very much appreciate. I'll catch you all later on the flip-flop. And yeah, have a good one, folks. I'll talk to you all later. Goodbye, everybody.
Hello, my name is Jessica and I'm the host of Jumping Knee Pod, a modern day All Japan podcast. Join me and a guest each month as we cover all that went down in the ring, outside of the ring and everywhere else. Big title matches, tournaments, character arcs, storytelling, feuds and more. It's all covered on Jumping Knee Pod. Look out for a bonus episode every once in a while covering a variety of All Japan topics. So make sure you tune into Jumping Knee Pod. It's a new All Japan podcast for a new All Japan era.
This has been a Count Out Podcast.